After Rodan was released in 1956, Toho Films took a bit of a break from the kaiju genre and focused on other films such as The Secret Scrolls, The Hidden Fortress, Throne of Blood. They made a ton of other films, didn't really go back to the kaiju genre until 1961. So it was 5 years, 1961, they returned with Mothra. And that is the topic of today's video, part of the Toho Toku Theater flashback series I'm doing here on the World of Geekdom channel. Tomoyuki Tanaka, the producer of Godzilla and several other big Toho successes, wanted to go back to the kaiju genre, so he hired Shinichiro Nakamura to write a new kaiju film with a new character, and this would introduce Mothra as well as the glowing fairies into the cinematic world. Originally they came from a magazine actually, and took this idea and adapted it into a film story, basically taking inspiration from both Godzilla and King Kong with regards to certain aspects of the story. First thing I have to say is Mothra was a huge success. This was a huge hit for Japan and also changed a lot of how kaiju films would be produced for the Showa era. Mothra really kind of set the foundation for the less serious, more somewhat campy, a little bit more lighthearted monster films. However, before we get to the really cheesy ones that would come in a few more years, I have to say that Mothra really has some cheesy elements, don't get me wrong, but with Mothra they come off more endearing than they do annoying, and sometimes it's hard to really find that balance. This movie changes what Gojira did. As far as having this really serious sort of metaphor for the nuclear atomic bomb explosions and what the seriousness of that first Gojira movie was. This film brings in more of a less serious tone with the fact that it has a ton of physical comedy and a ton of wacky over-the-top characters. Frankie Sakai, who was a very well-known Japanese comedian at the time, does a lot of the slapstick comedy in this film. He plays one of the main characters, and on top of that you've also got the villains, who in this movie are not like what they did with Rodan or with Godzilla Raids Again. The villains in this movie are not monsters fighting against Mothra. The villains of this film are evil human beings. Just humans themselves show themselves to be not very good. Not the human race as a whole, but specifically characters that, much like with King Kong, because it borrows a lot from King Kong, capture the glowing fairies, the twins, to use them to basically be a circus act for them, which would inspire the rage of Mothra to come about. And it becomes a race against time as they kick off the plot by capturing these glowing fairies, and the protagonists have to stop them because with the glowing fairies being captured, Mothra is angry, and Mothra is on her way to cause a lot of mayhem. The villains are so over the top. This is like the definition of mustache twirling. Like, just imagine the campiest Bond villains with the campiest Saturday morning cartoon villains, and you're going to get what this is. Imagine Jim Carrey from his portrayal of Dr. Robotnik in the Sonic movies, but all the way back 50 years earlier. That's kind of what we're getting here. And as far as the entertainment aspect of the movie, this was very, very effective. You see, if you remember back to my review of Rodan, one of the problems I had with that film, same thing with Godzilla Raids Again, is that in the first half of the movie, I mean, not with Godzilla Raids Again, but there's a mirror here. In Rodan, you don't even see Rodan until the second half of the movie. The first half of the movie focused on something that's totally unrelated. And with Godzilla Raids Again, you had these characters that I didn't really gravitate to or connect to whatsoever. And they just weren't that entertaining. They were kind of drab and not really anything that I really thought was that interesting. There wasn't really a character arc that I really appreciated. Both movies had that problem. In this movie, like with Rodan, you don't see Mothra until near the end of the film. But there is a build-up, and the difference is that the human characters that carry the first half of the story do their job. The sisters, played by actual, twin sisters, who are a pop group in Japan. I believe they're a pop group called the Peanuts from all the way back, like decades ago. They appear here to portray the twins. Once they are kidnapped, the natives of the island that Mothra is from start to worship the egg, because Mothra is originally just a giant egg, and you don't really see the moth itself until the egg hatches. And once the egg hatches, that's when chaos really hits, and the world is in deep trouble because Mothra is pissed at the fact that the twins, the fairies, are being used against their will as basically a Broadway act. It's a story that we've seen time and time again in tons of movies like this, but back for 1961, it wasn't really done that often. Before Mothra, King Kong would be the movie most famous for doing this, for having this sort of story where, you know, you are the one who's bringing a monster, you're bringing the trouble to humanity. These people, like the fairies and the savages and Mothra, you know, these you know, creatures, they you know, counting Mothra, not saying that the people are creatures, but you know, these islanders, they don't want to be bothered. They're not bothering humanity. Humanity comes and causes their own problems. They cause their own real issue. Now again, that does mirror Godzilla, because remember, Godzilla was born from the atomic bomb, which was a man-made contraption. This is different though. In this instance, they know. It's almost like they know this is not right. And granted, those who made the atomic bomb probably knew themselves something very similar, that it wasn't right. I would assume the scientists had an idea of how much destruction it would cause, but here it almost feels, you know, a bit more cartoony and a lot less serious. Obviously, there's nothing to joke about when it comes to the atomic bomb. In this movie, the villains are just so over the top that you can't help but laugh at them. Now, when it comes to the special effects, I gotta say, I was very impressed. For a movie that came out in 1961, you know, this film, the destruction, the way they used the miniatures here, I thought was better than Rodan, and that impressed me compared to, you know, movies of the time. The fact that you see a little bit of destruction in this film, and I think it does look better than how it looked in Rodan. I thought that Rodan kind of started this trend, you know, with the colored kaiju films, but this one really, I think Eiji Tsuburaya, who a lot of folks credit as just being this special effects wizard for Godzilla and Ultraman, I think people forget that not only was he those things, but he also got better as his career proceeded. I mean, the guy did not just harp on his success of Godzilla and how successful it was. He got better, he improved, and with each subsequent kaiju film, yeah, some of the destruction is lame, because some of these movies are lame, but, and I say that in a loving way, but here, the destruction looked serious, the effects, there's a really great use of blue screen. Remember, the twins are basically these mini people. You know, they're only a couple of inches tall, a few inches tall, and they're able to use blue screen and kind of camera effects that look pretty damn good for its day. This is the kind of stuff that we can very easily produce nowadays. Even people on the internet with an Apple iPhone and some editing software can produce stuff like this. But back in the day, this was breakthrough technology, and I thought they did a great job. The way Mothra looks in this film, I thought was fantastic. I love the elegance of Mothra, the beauty. Like, Mothra, I'm not even a fan of moths. Like, moths can be quite annoying, but Mothra just comes off ultimately lovable, and you kind of root for her. Like, you don't want people to die, obviously, but you kind of root for Mothra to get her vengeance, and you root for the heroes to stop it, even though if you know about these movies, obviously we're watching these movies years after they came out, and many of us were born after these movies came out, so we didn't see these in order like the ones, like people who were in Japan at the time saw them in. You know, you've seen this kind of stuff before in other movies. But for 1961, it was still fresh, it was still innovative, and it was still, to me, a technological marvel, because they made everything look real with camera effects, optical effects, and really great special effects. So Mothra, I loved this movie. I had the time of my life. I was laughing, I was cheering, I mean, I wasn't literally cheering, but you know what I mean? I was having a great time watching this in the Geekdom 101 Discord server. I love this movie, dude. I mean, honest to God, like, even though I respect Godzilla for what it did, the original 54 Godzilla, I think I may have enjoyed this one a bit more. Obviously, it's a different tone completely, but I think I may have enjoyed this film a bit more than the original Godzilla as far as the good time that I had. No, it's not as serious as the original Godzilla. It doesn't have that social commentary the original Godzilla had, even though it had some of it. And this movie wouldn't even exist without Godzilla. Still, it's one of those things where I had an amazing time watching this movie. And if you haven't seen it, seek it out. Because even if you're not a fan of Mothra, even if you're just a Godzilla fan, I mean, you've seen Mothra before if you're a Godzilla fan, obviously, I would assume. And if you haven't, we'll talk more about that as we get to some of the future Godzilla films. But definitely watch it. Even if you're not a kaiju fan, like, there's a lot of fun stuff in this film, and it's a good time. The next movie in the list will be King Kong versus Godzilla. Not Godzilla versus Kong. That one was from 2020. King Kong versus Godzilla. Or was it 2021? Whatever. We're going to King Kong versus Godzilla next. The return of Big G back on the big screen again in one of the most highly profitable monster movies ever made. That's next on the Toku theater. See y'all next time.